You trusted them. You showed up. You gave your best, and they crushed you for it. Not because you were weak, not because you were wrong, but because the world does not reward the honest. It rewards the calculated. And somewhere between the promises they made and the moment they turned on you, you lost something. Not just an opportunity, not just a relationship. You lost the belief that playing fair would ever be enough. It was not enough. It never was. And the sooner you understand that, the sooner you stop being a target and start becoming a force. This is not a video for people who want to be liked. This is a video for people who want to be untouchable. You know exactly what this feels like. The co-worker who smiled at your ideas in the meeting and presented them as her own 2 weeks later. The friend who cheered for you loudly in public and spent his private hours undermining you to anyone who would listen. The family member who called you arrogant every time you dared to believe in yourself, until your silence finally gave them peace and left you with nothing. These are not random cruelties. They are patterns. They are what happens to every person who operates by the rules of a game that was designed to keep them losing. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this over 500 years ago. Born in Florence in 1469, he served the Florentine Republic as a diplomat and political advisor. He sat across from kings. He watched princes rise and crumble. He saw armies built and empires dissolved, not by strength or virtue, but by naivety and miscalculation. And when the Medici family returned to power in 1512 and had him imprisoned and tortured, Machiavelli did not collapse. He retreated to a small farm outside Florence and wrote a book that would redefine power for the next 5 centuries. That book is The Prince, and everything inside it points to a single truth: the world will break you unless you learn to become ruthless. Today, you will discover the 8 ruthless principles Machiavelli observed, documented, and weaponized, principles that separate the people who are crushed by this world from the ones who learn to move through it on their own terms. 8 shifts in how you think, how you position yourself, and how you respond when the world comes for you. Once you see this, you cannot unsee it. There is no going back to comfortable naivety. If you want comfort, stop watching now. But if you are ready to see the game clearly, stay with this to the end. Before we begin, drop this in the comments right now. I no longer play by rules designed to keep me small. Principle 1. Pain is a furnace, not a grave. The world wants you to see your worst moments as endings. They are not. They are the exact conditions under which the strategic person is forged. Machiavelli once wrote, "The injuries that are done to a man all at once are less hurtful than those which are repeated continually." He was not talking about physical wounds. He was talking about the compounding erosion that happens to every person who absorbs blow after blow without ever restructuring their response. The person who is broken repeatedly, who never changes, who never adapts, that person is not unlucky. That person is philosophically unprepared. In 1512, Machiavelli himself was arrested by the Medici forces returning to power in Florence. He was accused of conspiracy, subjected to the strappado, a form of torture involving being dropped with hands bound behind the back, and imprisoned. He had served the Florentine Republic with loyalty and intelligence for 12 years. It did not protect him. The political winds shifted, and he was discarded. Most men in that cell would have collapsed inward. Machiavelli wrote, "The Prince, not as an act of surrender, but as an act of calculated repositioning." He understood that the pain was not there to destroy him. It was there to clarify what the world actually was and what it would take to move through it differently. Most people treat pain as evidence that they should stop. They fold back into smaller lives, smaller dreams, smaller risks, hoping that if they stop being visible, the world will stop hurting them. The strategic person treats pain as diagnostic information, not proof that they are wrong, but data about where their blind spots are and what adjustments are necessary. Psychologists Richard Tedeschi and Lawrence Calhoun identified this phenomenon in the 1990s and named it post-traumatic growth. Their research, published in peer-reviewed journals and expanded over decades, found that many individuals who experience significant adversity, betrayal, loss, catastrophic failure, go on to report greater personal strength, deeper clarity about what matters, and a fundamentally restructured sense of purpose. The suffering did not disappear, but they grew through it, rather than shrinking because of it. The key variable in every case was whether the individual remained passive or engaged actively with what the experience was revealing. You know what this looks like in a real situation. You get passed over for the promotion. The reason given does not match the reason you suspect is real. The naive person argues, complains, demands explanation. The strategic person becomes silent, observant, and deliberate. They are cataloguing exactly who the power actually rests with and what performance is truly being rewarded. They are not breaking. They are calculating. This is not about becoming numb. This is about refusing to let pain be the last word on who you are. Principle 2. The mask is not a lie. It is armor. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Very few experience what you really are. Machiavelli understood this as one of the most fundamental levers of power. Machiavelli once wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." This was not a cynical observation about deception. It was a precise analysis of how human perception actually operates, and how the sovereign person can use that gap between appearance and reality to their calculated advantage. Cesare Borgia, the Renaissance military commander and son of Pope Alexander VI, was the man Machiavelli called the closest embodiment of his ideal prince. Machiavelli observed Borgia personally during a Florentine diplomatic mission and was staggered by what he saw. Borgia moved through hostile environments, enemy states, treacherous allies, rival factions with a face of absolute composure. When he lured the Orsini conspirators to the city of Senigallia in 1502, men who had nearly overthrown him, he greeted them with warmth and openness, then had them strangled. Machiavelli wrote that Borgia's genius was not his brutality. It was the controlled gap between what he allowed others to perceive and what he was actually doing. Borgia understood that the face you present to the world shapes the moves other people make. Control the face. Control the board. Most people believe transparency is a virtue in all environments. They volunteer their fears, they explain their insecurities, they perform their doubts in public, hoping the world will respond with compassion. The strategic person understands that the world responds to projection, not confession. What you signal is what you become in the minds of others, and what you become in the minds of others determines how they move around you. The psychological mechanism here is called impression management, a concept extensively documented by sociologist Erving Goffman in his 1959 work, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. Goffman demonstrated that all social interaction involves a performance, a managed presentation of self adapted to the audience and the context. This is not pathological. It is human. The difference between the person who is exploited and the person who is not is often nothing more than the quality of their performance. The person who projects weakness invites predation. The person who projects calculated composure invites respect. Your manager schedules a tense review meeting. You already know the feedback will be unfair. There is a political element you have been watching for weeks. The reactive person shows up guarded and defensive. The strategic person shows up with total composure, asks sharp questions, takes careful notes, and reveals nothing about how they intend to respond. They leave that room with more information than they gave. That is the mask working. Drop this in the comments. My composure is the most powerful thing in the room. Principle 3. Silence is not weakness, it is selection. The person who never stops talking is the person who can always be read. And the person who can always be read can always be played. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." This principle is not only about fear as an emotion, it is about being unreadable. The person who commands fear does so not by being loud or violent, but by being controlled and opaque. Fear is a product of unpredictability, and unpredictability is produced by silence. Henry Kissinger, National Security Advisor under Richard Nixon, became legendary in diplomatic circles for a single tactic. He would enter major negotiations and say almost nothing in the opening sessions. Every attempt by the other side to fill that silence told him something new. Their actual position, their insecurities, their real priorities. By the time he moved, he already knew more about their hand than they had willingly revealed. The silence was the intelligence operation. Most people are terrified of silence. They rush to fill it. They explain themselves when no explanation was asked for. They justify decisions that no one questioned. They interpret a pause in conversation as a vacuum that needs filling. Each word they use to fill it is a piece of information they hand to someone who has not yet shown you whether they deserve it. The psychological mechanism at work is called the need for cognitive closure, a concept developed by psychologist Ari Kruglansky. People with a high need for cognitive closure are deeply uncomfortable with ambiguity and will often say or do whatever is necessary to resolve it quickly. The strategic person exploits this. They introduce ambiguity deliberately. They let silence sit. They watch the other person talk their way into revealing the truth of the situation. Information flows toward the person who knows how to be quiet. You are in a conversation where someone is probing you, asking indirect questions about your plans, your next move, your loyalties. The reactive person answers. The strategic person answers the question they wished had been asked, not the one that was. Or they answer with a question of their own. Or they say almost nothing and watch what the other person does with the silence. You learn more from watching someone navigate your silence than from any direct answer you could give them. Principle 4. Build in darkness. Emerge as thunder. The most dangerous mistake you can make is announcing your transformation before it is complete. Machiavelli once wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." The deception he described was not fraud. It was the strategic concealment of capability. The person who reveals how strong they are becoming gives every enemy the chance to adjust. The person who builds invisibly arrives at the moment of arrival with a power no one prepared for. In 1985, Steve Jobs was humiliated. He had been fired from Apple, the company he founded in a garage, by the very board he had helped build. The tech world quietly celebrated. His enemies inside and outside the company concluded that the chapter of Steve Jobs was closed. What they could not see was that Jobs spent the next 12 years building two things simultaneously: Next Computer and Pixar Animation Studios. He said almost nothing publicly about strategy. He said almost nothing about his intentions toward Apple. He built, refined, and prepared in near silence. Then, in 1997, Apple, having lost over $1 billion and laid off 3,800 employees, purchased Next for $429 million, and Jobs returned as CEO. Within 12 months, he had killed dozens of product lines, launched the iMac, and redirected the entire company. Within a decade, Apple became the most valuable company on earth. The enemies who had dismissed him in 1985 did not see the return coming because they were watching the wrong things. They were watching the noise. Jobs had moved entirely through silence. Most people make the catastrophic error of performing their growth publicly. They post every step of the process. They announce their plans. They seek validation at each stage of a transformation that is not yet complete. And every announcement is an invitation for interference, for doubt, for competition, for sabotage from people who needed to believe you were finished. The psychological principle here connects to what researchers call the social reality effect. Studies by Peter Gollwitzer at New York University found that when people announce their goals to others, the social acknowledgement of that announcement creates a premature sense of completion. The brain registers the identity shift before the work is done, reducing the motivation to follow through. Silence protects the work. It prevents the false satisfaction of the announcement from replacing the real satisfaction of the outcome. You are building something: a skill, a business, a reputation, a comeback. The world does not need to watch the construction. Let them see the finished building. Let your results announce your work. Let your arrival be thunder that no one heard coming. Drop this in the comments. I build in silence. I arrive as proof. Principle 5. Emotion is the weapon they use against you. Every time you have reacted from feeling instead of from calculation, you gave someone exactly what they needed to control the outcome. Machiavelli once wrote, "Whoever desires to found a state and give it laws must start with assuming that all men are bad and ever ready to display their vicious nature whenever they may find occasion for it. This is not misanthropy. This is the operational baseline of a person who refuses to be ambushed. The moment you assume goodness as a default, you have transferred the advantage to whoever is willing to be calculated." In 44 BCE, Julius Caesar was at the height of his power. He had conquered Gaul across a decade of campaigns, crossed the Rubicon in defiance of the Senate, and established himself as the dominant force in Rome. His enemies, including men he had personally pardoned and promoted, including his trusted ally, Marcus Junius Brutus, did not move against him through strength. They moved against him through his emotions. They appealed to his pride, his sense of destiny, his refusal to appear afraid. On the Ides of March, Caesar was warned. He received multiple signals that something dangerous was approaching. His wife Calpurnia begged him not to attend the Senate session after a dream. A soothsayer had warned him explicitly. But Caesar's emotional need to appear fearless and above suspicion overrode his strategic intelligence. He walked into the Senate chamber. 23 senators stabbed him. The greatest military mind of his age was defeated not by an enemy army, but by his own emotional ego. He could not afford to look afraid. That vanity cost him everything. Most people believe that passion and authenticity are virtues in every situation. They are not. They are vulnerabilities in the wrong environments. Every time you show your anger, you tell your opponent what hurts you. Every time you show your desperation, you tell them what you cannot afford to lose. Every time you let your pride dictate your behavior, you make yourself predictable. And the predictable person can be led wherever the other person wants them to go. The psychological mechanism is loss aversion, documented in Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's 1979 prospect theory research. Their findings demonstrated that the pain of a loss is psychologically approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. This asymmetry means that when someone threatens what you have or what you care about, your decision-making degrades under the weight of emotional urgency. You stop calculating. You start reacting. And reactive people make predictable moves. The strategic person knows this about themselves and creates distance between stimulus and response. Not because they feel nothing, but because they have decided that feeling does not get to make their decisions. Someone says something designed to destabilize you in a group setting. An insinuation about your competence, a joke at your expense, a challenge to your judgment in front of people whose opinion matters. The reactive person defends themselves immediately, loudly, visibly, emotionally. The strategic person pauses, smiles if anything, lets the comment land without chasing it, and then, privately, calculates exactly the right moment and method of response. The one who controls the timing always controls the outcome. Principle 6. Loyalty is conditional everywhere. Act accordingly. The most naive thing you can believe about any human relationship is that loyalty is permanent. It is not. It is conditional. It has always been conditional. And when you stop understanding that, you stop protecting yourself from the moment conditions change. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is much safer to be feared than loved, because love is preserved by the link of obligation which, owing to the baseness of men, is broken at every opportunity for their advantage." He was not recommending cruelty. He was issuing a warning. Build your position on what you can control, not on what others decide to feel about you. Feelings change. Incentives are more predictable. Napoleon Bonaparte trusted Charles Maurice de Talleyrand as his foreign minister for years, brilliant, indispensable, and apparently loyal. He was also, from the beginning, feeding information about Napoleon's plans to his enemies. Talleyrand had concluded privately that Napoleon's ambitions were unsustainable and worked quietly to dismantle the diplomatic alliances Napoleon depended on. He never announced it. He kept smiling until the betrayal could be executed with maximum effect. When Napoleon was exiled to Elba in 1814, the diplomatic architecture had already been hollowed out beneath him. Napoleon, who had watched empires fall, never fully processed the danger inside his own cabinet. He trusted sentiment over structure. Most people build relationships on the assumption that goodwill is self-sustaining. They give loyalty and expect the same in return, indefinitely, without maintenance or structure. The strategic person builds relationships on aligned incentives, situations where the other person's interest and your interest point in the same direction. Not because you distrust people by default, but because incentives are more reliable than sentiment. When incentives align, loyalty holds. When incentives shift, loyalty follows, and you want to know which direction it follows before it surprises you. The psychological principle at work is game theory's concept of conditional cooperation. Research by political scientist Robert Axelrod in his landmark 1984 work. The evolution of cooperation demonstrated through computer simulations that the most durable cooperative strategy was tit for tat. You cooperate first, you reciprocate what you receive, and you never exploit but also never endure exploitation passively. Unconditional cooperation, loyalty without limits, was consistently exploited and collapsed. Strategic, conditional loyalty outperformed both extremes over the long term. You can be generous. You do not have to be a resource without terms. You are working closely with someone whose interests currently align with yours. You are building something together, but you notice that the incentive structure is changing. They are being offered something that your collaboration would interfere with. The naive person waits and hopes. The strategic person quietly builds alternatives, documents their contributions, and ensures that if and when the alliance ends, they leave with everything they built and nothing that belongs to the other person. Drop this in the comments. I am generous with those who earn it. I am strategic with everyone else. Principle 7. Fortune rewards the architect, not the passenger. You have been waiting for the right conditions. You have been waiting for permission. You have been waiting for someone to clear the path and signal that it is safe. You will wait forever. The path does not clear. It is carved. Machiavelli once wrote, "I believe that fortune is a woman, and if you wish to keep her under, it is necessary to beat and ill-use her. And it is seen that she allows herself to be mastered by the adventurous rather than by those who go to work more coldly." Strip away the archaic language and the principle is precise. Fortune does not reward the cautious passenger. It rewards the person who moves toward it with velocity, decision, and the willingness to act before all the information is in. On February 26, 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte escaped from Elba with approximately 1,000 soldiers. Stripped of his empire, declared an outlaw by the entire Seventh Coalition, Austria, Prussia, Russia, Britain, every rational analysis said he was finished. He had no major army, no formal alliances, only the conviction that fortune required bold action. He landed in southern France on March 1st. The military sent to stop him defected. The king fled Paris. Napoleon entered the city on March 20th, 20 days after landing, without a single shot fired. He had recaptured France in 3 weeks from what every observer had declared an impossible position. He was ultimately defeated at Waterloo in June, but that 100-day return stands as one of history's greatest demonstrations of what audacious, calculated action can accomplish against impossible odds. Most people wait. They wait for certainty. They wait for momentum. They wait for external validation that it is time to move. The strategic person understands that certainty never fully arrives. It is always a matter of calculated probability. The person who waits for perfect conditions will still be waiting when the window has closed. The psychological concept is called action bias, studied extensively in behavioral research across fields from finance to sports. The research consistently shows that in high uncertainty environments, the people who move early and adjust often outperform those who wait for complete information. Waiting feels safe. But in systems where other players are also moving, waiting is its own form of risk, the risk that the field reconfigures around you while you stand still. You have been thinking about a move, a career pivot, a business idea, a conversation that could change a relationship's trajectory, a decision that requires you to bet on yourself. You have been gathering information, waiting, postponing. The strategic person picks a date, not an ideal date, a real date. They move on that date with what they have. They adjust as new information arrives. The architect does not wait for the ground to be perfect before breaking it. Principle 8. Ruthlessness is precision, not cruelty. The word ruthless frightens people who have confused it with cruelty. Cruelty is the use of power to cause unnecessary suffering. Ruthlessness is the elimination of everything that interferes with the outcome. They are not the same thing, and the confusion between them is exactly what keeps capable people from becoming sovereign. Machiavelli once wrote, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." This is not a license for violence. It is a structural principle. Halfway measures create enemies without creating resolution. Hesitation leaves threats intact. The person who acts incompletely, who removes a problem halfway, who cuts a relationship imprecisely, who confronts an issue vaguely, does not avoid conflict. They extend it and guarantee they will face it again from a weakened position. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was 90 days from bankruptcy. He was presented with a product line of over 40 items: desktop computers, laptops, printers, cameras, server products, and a dozen accessories that had accumulated without strategic coherence during his absence. Most newly returned leaders would have moved slowly, consulted broadly, and trimmed carefully to avoid conflict. Jobs organized a whiteboard session. He drew a 2x2 grid, consumer versus professional, desktop versus portable. He eliminated everything that did not fit into one of those 4 boxes. 40 products became 4. Entire divisions were shut down. Hundreds of engineers were reassigned or let go. He did not do this with apology or explanation. He did it with precision. The cruelty interpretation would be he was cold and uncaring about the people affected. The ruthlessness interpretation is the accurate one. He had identified exactly what Apple needed to survive, and he removed everything that interfered with that outcome, without sentimentality and without hesitation. Within a year, Apple was profitable. Within a decade, it was the most valuable company on earth. The ruthlessness was not the enemy of Apple's humanity. It was the precondition for its survival. Most people perform consideration where precision is required. They hold on to strategies that have stopped working because abandoning them feels like admitting failure. They keep relationships that are consuming more energy than they are generating because ending them feels unkind. They continue down paths they know are wrong because changing course feels like weakness. The strategic person understands that clinging to what is no longer serving you is not loyalty. It is cowardice dressed as virtue. The psychological mechanism is the sunk cost fallacy, the bias of continuing to invest in something because of what was already spent, regardless of its current value. The cost is gone. The only question is what the best move is from this position. Ruthlessness, in its truest sense, is simply the clarity to make that evaluation without being held hostage by history. There is a project in your life right now that you know is wrong, a relationship that is costing more than it returns, a habit or strategy or plan that made sense when you built it, but no longer fits who you are or where you are going. You have been holding it out of loyalty, nostalgia, or fear of what releasing it says about your past decisions. Release it, not with drama, not with explanation, with the quiet precision of a person who has made a calculation and acted on it. This is not about cruelty. This is about refusing to be held hostage by choices that no longer serve you. Drop this in the comments. I release what no longer serves me. Precisely. without apology. Let's move through what you now carry. Pain is a furnace, not a grave. It reveals your blind spots and upgrades your calibration. The mask is not a lie, it is armor. Control the perception others carry of you, and you control the board they play on. Silence is not weakness, it is selection. The person who speaks least in the right moments extracts the most information. Build in darkness, emerge as thunder, announce nothing until the work is done, and the result speaks for itself. Emotion is the weapon they use against you. Distance between stimulus and response is the foundation of all strategic intelligence. Loyalty is conditional everywhere. Build your alliances on aligned incentives, not on assumed permanence. Fortune rewards the architect, not the passenger. Move toward what you want before conditions are perfect, because conditions will never be perfect. Ruthlessness is precision, not cruelty. Eliminate what interferes with the outcome without sentimentality and without apology. You are not the same person who started this video. If the words landed, not as entertainment but as architecture, then something has restructured inside you. A new standard, a new threshold, a new clarity about what you will accept and what you will not. Machiavelli studied power not because he loved cruelty, but because he understood that the alternative to strategic intelligence is not innocence. It is victimhood. The person who refuses to understand how power operates does not escape it. They are simply operated on by those who do. You have chosen differently today. Drop this final affirmation in the comments. I am untouchable. Not because the world stopped coming for me, but because I stopped being surprised by it. If this changed the way you see the world, not just how you feel about it, but how you will move through it, hit like, subscribe. We are building something here that goes far deeper than motivation. We are building a framework, and the next video goes further into the mechanics of dark intelligence, how the most dangerous people in any room think, and how you can develop that same sovereign clarity. Do not miss it.